and also from Denver, Colorado. We're sort of international megastars this evening. So I'll introduce you to our stars in a short while. Welcome to the show. It's a live show, as you know. I'm Noel, I'm your host. It'd be lovely if you joined us. We're streaming live on various platforms, YouTube, Facebook, and I think Twitter as well. So you can join us on any one of those platforms and drop some comments, have some questions for our guests, for me. Anything you've got. Be really good to hear from you. You can also call. Be great to hear you. Here's the phone. Just give us a call. The number's 07506 319 745. So that's +44 7506 319 745. And get through on WhatsApp if you're calling from outside the UK, and you can join in with us. Enough from me. Enough of that. I get bored of having to say that every week, but I just want to encourage you to join in. We've got two amazing brothers joining us this evening, like I say, from the US, Jose and Ralph. Hello, welcome guys. How are you doing?
Doing good. Thanks for having us.
Good. Welcome. So you two have got some extraordinary stories to tell us, which I want to hear about very, very shortly. But let's just have a brief catch up on how things are going over there in terms of, what's going on in the US at the moment. How are you coping with the situation? Ralph, why don't you give us some idea of how things are with you, and sort of, you've just gone through some quite intense times in the US, and then we sort of the rest of the world looks at sort of the numbers around COVID and stuff like that and just go, whoa, hang on a minute. So what's it like for you? How are you getting through these sort of interesting times in your country?
In the military, I'm pretty good with routines. And so, early off, I decided, this is the time where a lot of people are going to take the gas off. This is the time I had to go all in. So I completely immersed myself in my routine. And since the beginning of COVID, March 15th for me. And so, last month I was on and, following the guidelines, doing as much as I could to, stay within, the coronavirus guidelines, but I was continuously training. I had teammates around, and, I created an environment so I could thrive with the drawdown and all that.
Great. Good for you. And Jose, how's it been for you?
It's up and down sometimes. There's been moments that have been challenging, of course, internally. And it's just, the beauty of having something to do and having a purpose and staying focused. And that's really what's really helped me keep my head above the water and keep my head, and not just my head, my heart, my emotions above, all the discord that's out there right now, because it's very easy to get drawn into that right now, especially with social media and all that. And, I just stay focused on the work that we do here. And I just remember that at the end of the day, we're all people, and we still got to love each other after this.
Yeah. It's been challenging times over there. And I think, with the election and stuff like that, we were talking just before the show about, how some personalities are abrasive and may create reactions, and other personalities are more inclusive. And you may have been through a period of time, it seems, in the US from our perspective, where a slightly more abrasive style has been in place, which has had its results. And we had the same in the UK some years ago with one of our political leaders who had a more abrasive, in-your-face style. And you got that sort of response back. And then since then, we haven't really had anybody like that. But I think, you maybe now are due a little bit of time to calm down, maybe a little bit, and to have some of that healing that we'll talk about. But it's interesting, I think, when we go through challenging times, it can break us or it can make us, is the simple thing. And both of you have really powerful stories about how you've got to this place in your life. And I wonder, maybe, Jose, do you want to start us off telling us about something about your experience leading up to sort of where you are now?
To sum it up as much as I can, going through my life experience, like most people, I didn't really have too much awareness of what was going on. I was just in it, experiencing it kind of blindly and just going with the flow.
Yeah.
I'm born and raised in Los Angeles, the harbor area of Los Angeles, in the inner cities. My parents divorced when I was 5. And after my parents divorced, you know, my mom became, you know, physically abusive in her discipline and raising us. You know, I'm one of 6. And my mom, you know, thought that was the way to teach us right from wrong. And she definitely took it overboard. And as a kid, I couldn't really understand what was happening. I only just felt the hurt. You know, I couldn't understand how the woman whom I loved the most in this entire world was the one who was hurting me the most. And going through those emotions as a kid, you know, I didn't have the answer for that. So instead, the only answer was to numb myself and to find ways to numb myself and things like that. And you know, the violence in my home continued all the way up to my older teenage years. And you know, finally I found an outlet for all the pent up emotion that I had. And that outlet was a gang that I had joined. You know, I joined a gang when I was 16 years old.
Yeah.
There was violence in the gang, and to me that wasn't foreign. It was normal. So it felt familiar, and it kind of felt like love. It's what I identified as love. And I thought that those guys loved me. And I guess in their best way they did, and the only way we knew how. And you know, it's just, you know, I went down a life path that was pretty much all negative, you know. And the worst part about it is that I thought it was normal and I thought it was okay.
Yes.
I ended up going to prison when I was 18 and a half for multiple robberies. And prison was just an extension of what I had experienced in my youth, my teenage years. And now it's, you know, spilled over to my adulthood, which was just more violence, more love in the guise of violence. People telling you, you know, hey, this is how you display your love, your loyalty. You have to go exert your physical will on somebody else. And it's so twisted that you think it's kind of right. Like you have a feeling of like, man, you know, you're that's solidified, it's validated, and you're kind of forming this thought process where everything that's negative is being reinforced.
Yeah.
And you know, so that definitely,
people may be finding this difficult to understand why this is an expression of love. Now, sort of, it's not something I told you in our conversation, but I worked a lot with kids in gangs here in London, and all the gang leaders will tell you that the way you recruit kids is that you're loving and kind towards them. And so all these kids who come from very traumatized backgrounds like yourself, you show them a bit of love and bang, they're right in there. They're absolutely 100% loyal. That's what they're desperate for, is somebody to show that type of emotion to them. And that's confirming your experience, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
You need somebody to say, yeah, I welcome you, I accept you, and here's how you gain esteem. You do X,
Right.
Y, and Z. And then you're part of it. You're part of the deal. You're part of the family, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's powerful to be a part of something, to feel love, to feel like, you know, that you're not the only one. Cause before I was just a kid on my own getting abused. And now I have a group of people who are my friends, who have my back, and that love, it's a form of love that's negative, and it's purely conditional. You know, it's the most conditional love you're going to find is the love in a gang. Yeah. We love you until you do this.
Yeah.
We love you until that, until this, until that, until this. And, you know, it hardens your heart, and it definitely hardened mine. And, you know, my experience in prison was, you know, I was just trying to survive, and I can't say I really made a plan for when I was going to get out or anything close to that.
But I imagine quite traumatized as well. You must have been having symptoms of trauma, you know, sort of flashbacks and numbing out and disassociation, those types of things as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's intense. Prison's intense. But like I said, I'm already at a level of numbness in
Yeah,
there. I never felt like I didn't belong in there. You know, I never felt, oh man, poor me. I'm in prison with all these bad guys. It was more like we accept that as being part of the life,
yeah,
and we accept that as being normal. And to get out of that thought process, man, it takes heaven and earth to move. Um, and luckily, you know, within my life journey, I finally, you know, my eyes were able to open to realize that the whole way that I had seen life, the whole way that I had rationalized things, good and bad, was completely wrong. That of my whole moral system was completely bent and broken.
yeah,
And, you know, and I finally got back into my own story with the abuse of my childhood. And I started, you know, making sense of why I was the way that I am.
yeah. And Ralph, you're nodding along to this. Of course, you had the same types of experiences. You know, you're in the same
You
household.
know, that this stemmed from, you know, me and him having these conversations and realizing that, you know, even though we went down different paths, there was a lot of parallels in it. And so same thing, you know, born and raised in Los Angeles, my father left when I was 5 years old. And I had this void in my heart that I had been chasing my whole life. You know, I wanted to make this person come back in my life. And so, you know, when I came up of the age of being in high school, it turned from, you know, I need that love from him to a chip on my shoulder where it was like, I don't need you. I'll do it on my own. And I'm going to show you, so to speak. And so for me, my outlet was sports. So I started playing football at a very young age. And just like him, you know, I felt that love and that the leadership and, you know, the camaraderie and, you know, just being with guys that want the same thing that you want, and that's to win football games. And so I fell in love with that mentality. You know, whatever you put in is what you're going to get out on the football field. And that was very apparent for me from day one, you know. And so that lesson has carried on throughout me through my whole career, my whole life. And, you know, that was, you know, it's paramount in who I am. So that's literally what gets me through a lot of the toughest times is, you know, that mentality
Yeah,
of, you know, surrounding yourself with people that want the same for you, and everyone collectively working together for that goal.
yeah,
And as you can see, I joined the Marines when I was 19. It was a little bit after 9/11, and the Marines, you know, they solidified all those feelings. You know what I mean? You go into the Marines and now it's the same thing. You have camaraderie, you have teamwork, you have a mission, and now it's a matter of life and death. So that the gravity of it is so
yeah,
much more important. And so when that gets reinforced that way, you know, it's kind of hard to take that out of your character. Now it's embedded in me. Like I couldn't change it if I wanted to. And so with the transferring over to hockey, it did the same thing for my hockey career. Is I got into another situation where the guys are the same as me and they wanted the same things, and it helped pull me out of another dark space. And so that's, like I said, we have similar parallel stories as, you know, different circumstances, but I mean, we've felt the same emotions and went through the same emotions and whatnot.
yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I think people might think, well, what's the similarities between prison and the Marines? And actually, I can see quite a lot of similarities. And I remember talking to quite a senior army official, and we were just chatting about sort of PTSD trauma. I talk about these things because I'm a therapist, and how you can screen for the predisposition, the predisposing factors for PTSD. Right. You could do that with all these army recruits, right? You could say, well, we won't take you because you're high risk of developing PTSD. But what he said was, if you do that, you won't have an army.
Right, exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Because that's the choice, ultimately.
Yeah.
It's the army or it's the prison. Or, you know, this used to be the case in London. It was the boxing ring. So you would join the boxing club or the athletics group, as you were discussing. And that was where all these damaged boys would go. So they'd end up in the gang, they'd end up in the army, they'd end up in a boxing ring. And that's what was available for them to. But the other thing that's striking me was the lack of that early father figure. And I wonder, do you mind you guys talking about that, what that was like, and what your journey was in terms of, again, trying to find that father figure and that replacement. Jose, you're moving. Does that move you to talk?
It's the caffeine. But I'll go on and yeah, I mean, I think as kids, like, we don't know the importance of that father figure. I know that I always, even though he was gone, that, you know, I always longed for him my entire life. I always thought that he would come back, until I maybe prayed every night, you know, man, God, please bring my dad back, you know, being a kid still, and thinking that if he came back, things would be better. And I think, you know, I thought that, I mean, they broke up when I was 5. I mean, maybe 13, 14 years old. Like, it's crazy. And literally I woke up one day and I was like, man, I don't think he's ever coming back.
Right.
And, you know, and I think, you know, that hurt, that realization hurt. And, you know, holding on to that hope and thinking that he would come back. And then finally seeing that, you know, he's not. And then beyond that, looking outside of my front door and just seeing what life had in store for me, it wasn't anything beautiful.
Yeah.
It was a sad realization in that moment. Like, man, I guess this is just what life is. That this is what my life is going to entail. And the next best thing going that I saw was, you know, a gang culture where I did see male leadership, and I did see an ability for me to exert my my quote unquote manhood, or however you want to put it. And it was liberating for me, you know. And, you know, growing up getting hit all the time, when I was finally able to hit somebody else, I mean, it wasn't like intoxicating, you know. It wasn't a feeling that I would run away from. It was something that I would actually pursue.
Yeah.
Because it felt that I could fight back. And I felt that such a let out of aggression that I had held in for so many years, and so much pain. And
did you carry a lot of shame because of the violence? I mean, often.
Of course, I was embarrassed that I got beat. I couldn't tell anyone that, my mom's slapped me across my head, or my mom held this, did that, or etc. because I'm hurt. I'm going to end up crying. I'm going to end up, you know, I can't fully articulate it at that time, that it's just all emotion. It's all hurt. It's all pain, and I can't process it. So of course I was ashamed. I held it in, and I kept it in for so long, and I didn't barely ever start talking about it until a few years ago.
It was interesting for me because when we had the telephone conversation or the Skype conversation before the show, I told you my mother was violent as well, and she'd grown up in a violent home in Irish republicanism, which was terrorism. So there you go. And had a very brutal father herself, and you know, very, very unpleasant sort of experiences, and so it was normal for her. This violence as a way of controlling and all that sort of stuff. And it had this odd impact as that it took me many, many years to understand that. I spent a long time being afraid that every woman that I was involved with was going to hit me. It took me ages to acknowledge that, because it was such an embarrassing thought.
Yeah.
Like, I can't possibly say, I'm afraid you're going to thump me.
Yeah. Or that's she asks you, your girlfriend asks you, why are you flinching?
No way.
Instinct.
Long story.
I used to do things like, I don't know if you had this experience as well, but sometimes I'd be in bed with an ex, or now an ex, but I'd be with one of my partners, and I'd wake up sweating in terror and not knowing why. And it was literally because I hadn't processed those experiences of, you know, I had a very loving mother who was also very violent. So I had these tactile body memories of being hugged by her. And then the unpredictability of the screaming, the shouting, and the violence and stuff like that. And so I could wake up in bed with something, and I'd be in a panic attack.
Yeah.
Because I was literally having a flashback around this sort of stuff. You're nodding. It's like similar.
I mean, there'd always be a not that intense, but like an underlying fear. you know, underlying fear. Like it's subtle too. And I'm like, man, is she gonna snap? And you know, it's like you kind of expect it to happen. It's happened so many times, and a lot of times it never happened, but sometimes it did.
It's like walking on eggshells.
Yeah, walking on eggshells, exactly.
Yeah. And what about your sort of childhood experience as well? Was there violence for you as well, Ralph?
Yeah, there was a little bit of violence for sure. You know, when having my dad leave at a young age, like I didn't know what that figure was. You know, I don't know what I don't know. And so, you know, my mom eventually got another relationship, and he was an alcoholic and very abusive. And so I didn't know what having a father was going to be like, but I knew that wasn't it. You know, going through that, like I didn't feel that your father should be picking you up, throwing you against the wall and punching you. And so I tried to run from that and was like, yo, this can't be it, you know? And so eventually, you know, my mom had left him, and then the man that I call dad now, he came into my life, was a pretty prominent figure at a, you know, 10 years old and over. And he was very much a disciplinarian, you know, he had a great work ethic and, you know, very much a disciplinarian. But at that age, I also felt like that wasn't it either, you know. And now as an adult, I look back at it, I'm like, thank God he instilled discipline in me. Thank God he, you know, had that work ethic, and he taught me that work ethic, because it's why I'm here where I'm at right now. But when I was going through it, I was, no, this isn't it. And so when I started the sports, I saw men saying things that I felt internally, you know, like you put in what you put out, or you get what you put in, and stuff like that. And I felt like I knew those kinds of things. And so I gravitated to them because they were saying the things that I wanted to hear.
Yeah, right. It's odd, that whole experience of stepfathers. My stepfather was my genetic father. He's still alive, and I don't really talk about him very much, but he is an alcoholic and still is, and all that sort of stuff. He's given himself brain damage from his drinking. But he was a very frightening man. I just seem to remember growing up very afraid of the guy, which is not a great start. You know, it's like, I'm not sure you're supposed to feel like that as a child about anybody. But my second father, Alf, was a very, very stable man. He was very, very different. And I you know, at the time, I didn't appreciate it as much as I now, as a 53-year-old man, I think back on that guy as he was really quite. I can't imagine what it was like to take on us.
That's how I feel too. That's how I feel too. I was like, really? I was 37 years old. I was like, man, I must have been a handful. Like,
yeah, really. I mean,
imagine
five kids who were wild. But he seemed to deal with it. Now, Alf was one of those people who's sort of really interesting guy, in that I was more worried about sort of losing his respect for me than I was him hitting me or frightening me or anything like that. It became more important. There was something about him which was very much values driven. And he sort of had a set of values and he lived by them. Maybe you didn't agree with them all the time, but he certainly did. You know, he walked what he talked, and was totally predictable, absolutely predictable. And that was, you know, but at the time, because I was mad, it's like it felt like too horribly restricting, but because I was absolutely bonkers with all this trauma and stuff like that, it was just too much. And you're nodding away there going, oh, I sort of recognize that. So you go into the army. Tell us about what it was like. I mean, you were a very competitive sportsman, then you joined Marines, and you're serving your country, and thanks for your service, even though it wasn't in the UK, but still, thanks for your service.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. So tell us about that. How was that for you?
You know, after graduating high school, you know, I was a football player and I wanted to play college football, but, you know, not knowing the classes that I needed to take and all that, like I wasn't afforded the opportunity to go to a good college because I didn't take all the required prerequisite classes that I needed to. And so I went to a community college, and while I was there, I was at a study hall and I witnessed, you know, the planes run into the Twin Towers. And so
I remember that day. It was wow.
Yeah. And I remember very 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm with my girlfriend at the time, her sister, and we're walking into this place and we're looking at the TV and we're thinking to ourselves, like, what the heck? Like, what is this?
I
have
thought it
no
was
clue.
Towering Inferno because it was on at
And so,
work, and I thought
yeah,
it was a movie,
yeah.
literally. Yeah.
And so, you know, so for me growing up where I grew up, like I was never that nationalistic kind of guy. Like I was trying to figure out the day to day inside San Pedro, California, Wilmington, California, and not trying to get into trouble. And so, but for some reason, when I saw that, something compelled me and said, "Hey, you got to do something bigger than what you're doing right now." And so, you know, 6 months later, I was heading my way up to boot camp and becoming a Marine. And so instantly, you know, we get there and they breaking you down from who you thought you were into nobody. And then they built us back up. And the way they built you back up, you know, I identified with everything that they wanted to do, you know, sacrifice, doing something that's bigger than yourself, and, you know, making sure that the mission was the most important thing. And then, you know, you take your role and make yourself the big person, and you pull yourself on, you say, hey, this is bigger than what you feel. And then that's your foundation right there. And so, you know, joining the military was one of the best things. I would do it all over, even though knowing what had happened throughout my whole career. And so, you know, when I joined the bomb squad in the Marines, that solidified my character more than anything at that time and place. You know, we were literally in life and death scenarios, and I was around some of the greatest men that I've ever, you know, been able to be close to. And so, you know, when you're willing to sacrifice your life for someone else's life and you're around those kind of guys, there's a sense of like you're up here, but you're also down here. So there's, you know, you feel like you can walk in the clouds, but you know, you're in the dirt. And that's like a beautiful feeling for somebody that knows that they're willing to go into the dirt for somebody else. And so, you know, like I said, you know, I was blown up in Afghanistan in 2012 in June, and I lost a teammate in May. And so you can imagine losing someone in your hands and it being so traumatic. But the tools that I had developed beforehand, like I knew I had to take that negative experience and turn it into a positive experience as fast as possible. And even though it's not a positive experience, I could use positive outlets. And, you know, so since then, like I was talked to Jose about all the time, like it changed my intent in life. Like instead of just going through the motions and you know, whatnot, trying to do this, that, and the other, it was like, now I have to, because I just witnessed someone die in my own hands, and life is too short. You know what I mean? And so now you have to go attack the day every single day with intent, humility, and gratitude at the end of the day. And so that kind of pulled me out of that. And then eventually I got blown up. And so, you know, sitting in a hospital bed, you have to go through those thoughts all over again. And so, yeah, that was a dark time for me to battle, you know, losing my legs, a traumatic event like that. Like the life that I knew is now over.
Yeah.
So I went into a deep depression for about a year, and I had to re-identify who I was. And so when I found the sport of sled hockey, it literally pulled me back and said, hey, you're home now. You can go back to work. You have a purpose, and you can get better at something day and day. And so it filled the void right away. And like I said, you know.
And so what's the connection here between you two then? I'm just thinking, here's a gangbanger in prison. Here's this guy in the Marines getting blown up. Hang on, how does this story begin to weave together? This is extraordinary. So jump in, Jose. Tell us about
the stories. You know, Ralph got blown up. He lost both his legs, and he was doing his rehab in Walter Reed and on the East Coast. And I think he was 4 years in or around there. And he gave me a call and he said, "Hey, bro, I need a roommate." And he was married at the time. And, you know, I'm in my own world. I haven't started the journey of getting better whatsoever. You know, I'm still just
using at this point.
Oh yeah, I'm full blown. You know,
this is the thing. Jose has
full blown alcoholism. Except, you know, I didn't know how bad it was then. I didn't end up finding out how bad it was until later, because I had to get taken out of, you know, the lifestyle. But yeah, you know, I'm just living my life thinking it's normal. The way I'm coping with all of my issues is simply with just drinking. I have no positive outlet at all. Yeah. I'm just working and drinking, and that's it. You know, me and my girlfriend had broken up. And so it was like a perfect storm. He called me. I said yes. And he booked a flight from the East Coast. I booked a flight. I was in San Antonio, Texas at that time from Texas. We came to Denver. We looked at a bunch of places. The last place we saw, we signed the lease. We flew back to our respective homes. We packed our stuff and we came over here. And that's where.
Ralph, what made you want to reach out to Jose at that point? What was the driving force there for you?
You know, like I've always considered them
availability.
No, honestly, I always considered it a family, and so I knew that, you know, if in a time I needed, they would be there, because I feel like they knew that the same of me. And so I kind of had a gist of what was going on in San Antonio, and I was like, well, he's literally the only person I can call at this moment. And luckily, he said yes, because, you know, it led us to this now.
So a sort of interesting time. I mean, I think that there's something interesting about these moments in life when we're offered an opportunity, and we can make a choice, can't we? We can stay in the shit, excuse my language, or we can just say, it's time to do something. And it feels like this was one of those times for you, for you both, but certainly for you, Jose. It's like, and how did you feel about seeing Ralph in, you know, like his legs blown off, he's come out of the army, sort of, what was that?
You know, I remember when I first got the call when he lost his legs. It was devastating. Jessica called me, you know, my sister called me. She said, Ralph lost his legs. We don't know if he's going to make it. You know, we all started praying and we all cried, you know, on the phone, and we weep and we pray and then we figure it out. You know, I mean, you know, I visited him in Walter Reed. I think I flew over there, stayed there for a week, just chilled. And, you know, it's a journey. Like, you could see that he's in the in between. You know, you can see when people are in the in between, like either you're going to fail or you're going to succeed. And, you know, and the only thing you can do is be there, because they're going through something internally that only they can get through. And a lot of times people just need the support. They just need to know that they're not alone. And that's for most of us, you know, fortunately.
Very humble about what you've just said, Jose. There's a lot of humility in what you've just said. It was a sort of knowing your place within that you couldn't rescue Ralph, but you could be available as you.
Yeah, I mean, that's all. And you know, you go in with the right intent. I think good things happen, and that's certainly what happened. We both came to Denver, and that's where shit hit the fan internally for the both of us. You know, we just said yes. I had no you know, I thought well, I was already
that's enough shit, man. Seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I was in the shit in San Antonio, but I was so used to being in the shit. I was comfortable in it. You know, it was like, oh, okay, this is life. This is normal. But when I came to Denver, I got to meet different people and see life differently, where I had to question my own beliefs. I had to question my own way of living. I had to analyze myself because I had nothing externally to validate me. I didn't have my homies here. I didn't have people who knew me from LA here. I wasn't doing anything illegal here. I just had myself, and I wasn't comfortable with myself.
Yeah, right.
I didn't know how to deal with that. And you know, so I just drank. I drank. And I think, you know, Ralph, you know, we lived together. I think he can tell you it was everyday intense type of thing. And I think Ralph was the same with me. He saw that I was going through something, and I think he was just there, you know, at that point. Like, I couldn't be told anything because I still had the woe is me attitude, that no one's had it harder than me attitude, the I'm the victim, so I get to be an addict attitude, that this is why I'm using, because you don't understand, you know, and that's a pit that leads to an abyss.
Yeah.
And that's where I went internally, and it was intense. I had never felt, you know, I was so used to being numb, and it led to such a deep depression, to the anxiety of physical connection to it as well. And it's like life was hitting me from all sides, and I couldn't identify what was going on. And I just wanted it to stop. You know, I wanted the negative thoughts to stop. I would be going to work every day and seeing people smiling and wondering if they can see that I thought about killing myself today. If they can just read right through me, when they see me, do they know, you know, the things that I'm going through? I hope not. And it's intense. And, you know, I had to look in the mirror and answer for all the things I had done. And I couldn't stand my own reflection.
Right.
And I wanted to take my own life. And when I say that, I mean that. And it was to the point where I was going to do it.
Yeah. So you had a plan, you knew how you were going to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I knew I wasn't going to, Ralph has guns here. I was like, man, you know, out of respect for Ralph, I don't want to use one of his guns, you know? But it was like, okay, if I'm going to jump off, we have a dog battles, and he jumped off the 6th story and he made it. So I was like, well, if I'm going to jump off, it's got to be higher than the 6th floor, because I certainly don't want to jump and make it. So, you know, but you know, those, you know, we can laugh about it now, but while I was in it, man, it was a ringer. It was intense, and it broke me all the way down, and I didn't know how to deal with it. And, you know, I went, you know, I had to quit drinking because of DUI. So I had to sit with myself even more. And it was too much. I couldn't make sense of it.
Did they send you to a rehab for the DUI? Did they give you that option?
No,
was it?
I did. They did the, I did, yeah, the whole course. I didn't really learn much in there. But I did end up going to AA, and that was started the upward.
Okay.
But before that, you know, like, I didn't have a plan. I had nothing. I thought that I was just, you know, that my life didn't mean anything, that my story didn't mean anything, and that, and that I just,
that's how it is. That's right. Yeah,
exactly.
And, Ralph, I'm just wondering what it was like for you watching this guy that obviously you loved going through this stuff, and sort of helpless to do anything other than witness it, I guess.
I was so immersed in my day to day that, yeah, it was a struggle for me as well to watch him going through all that. But I also felt that he had to do it himself, just knowing who he is. And I knew I wouldn't be able to approach him. If I had, he would have left. And at least if he would have did that, I wouldn't have known what was going on. And so it was just a lot of enduring, because I was like, at least he's here. I know he's here. He's going to be safe or whatnot. But I didn't know how to approach him in a way that, like, you know, we can get them on that up. And so,
did you understand how deep in the hole he was? I mean, could you identify that? Because you'd been in that hole yourself, hadn't you? You'd been sort of
right. But he was like, he's his own man at that point. You know what? Like, we grew up together, but at this point, we've been away for so long that this was him. Like, this is the person that I knew, and so I didn't know what the other side was, so to speak. So I didn't know what the right side of it was going to be like. But like I said, I was so immersed in, you know, chasing a gold medal that, you know, I went through a divorce myself, you know, trying to chase my dream, because I literally shut that person out as well. And so it was just, you know, just boom, boom, boom. Let me stay focused. Let me stay in this grind. Let me do what it is that I decided to do 4 years ago. And so that was my mentality going through it. You know, yeah, it was hard. Like, times I was like, damn, like, this guy needs to get his shit together. But at the same time, it was like I was going through it too mentally. You know what I mean? Going through a divorce, trying to figure it out, trying to chase this dream, not knowing if it was going to happen. And, you know, throwing so many eggs into this one basket just to not know if it was going to come through for me. Yeah. So there was a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, you know, just like, dang, like, if you don't accomplish this, it's all for nothing at that point. And that was me going through the journey. But then, you know, now here we are now, and it's total 180. It's beautiful.
Well, let's talk about that 180, because I mean, I think I understand, Ralph, that, you know, what you've been taught was the mission was the focus, and you were still in that, weren't you? You were like, this is my mission. I've got to get this. Doesn't matter what it costs. But you've learned from that, because it did cost you stuff, and you've been sensible and learned from it. And then, Jose, you hit what they say is a rock bottom, Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that reasonable? Do sort of the courts catch up with you because you're driving drunk and they go, here's an option, young man. But you could have taken the bad option, but you didn't. You somehow came out of that DUI making a sensible decision, which was to stop using. Okay.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of this change, I guess, for you. You try AA. I know you don't go to it now, but it was helpful at first. Yeah.
Very, very helpful.
Okay. What helped you there, do you think?
Like I told Ralph, I mean, the biggest thing that I learned from AA, I mean, when you're in a deep depression and wanting to kill yourself, you don't just wake up the next day and it's over. It's a process. When I went to that first meeting and I heard people share their stories and their faults in a raw, real way, I had a connection and I felt that I wasn't alone. And it was a relief for me. It was it's not just me, you know. I'm not just the one going through this. And when other people are articulating their struggles with addiction and how they deal with it and their inner thoughts, like it was the most, you know, it was what I needed to hear. And, you know, it let me know that, hey, I'm not alone. There's millions of us. And, you know, it was relieving.
I mean, there is millions of people using 12-step, 35 million people around the globe at the moment. So, you know, it's working for some people. And gets you sober. And what was that like, Ralph, meeting this guy who was sober and emotional and available suddenly?
So a meeting with him one time and, you know, just stepping in there, I'm like, I felt the same way. I was like, you know, these are like people, you know, like they're out there, humility, you know, just totally bluntly honest and whatnot. And I thought that was beautiful because, you know, it's very hard for someone to open up like that. And I guess the way he explains, you know, being comfortable around like-minded people, like I saw that. And so when the change started to shift, I that energy just in the house just changed. You know what I mean? It went from like what's going to go on today to like we know that we're going this way. You know what I mean? And so I was all in. I was all in for this.
So this change also had a transformation with you as well. So which is what people talk about sometimes with this sort of recovery stuff, that it begins to sort of infect in a good way people around the addict as they get recovery. Were you then able to begin to open up and start talking to each other about just how bad shit had been?
That was like one of the catalysts, really, you know, because he might have started it off, you know, just talking about what he was going through, and they just opened up to where I can talk about what was going on with me, and then, you know, we're like looking at each other like, shit, like, all right, we're kind of the same, you know what I mean? We're going through it together.
What age were you then when these conversations they start? What age do you think?
31, 30, 31.
Yeah. Well,
I was 35. Yeah.
Man, what world are we in, us guys? That it takes us 3 decades.
That's what I tell myself every day. Like, why couldn't you learn this then?
Serious. Yeah. Serious. It takes us 3 decades, losing our legs, becoming addicts. Why? It's just bonkers, isn't it?
You know, for me, I lost the value of my story. You know, after achieving my dream was to win a gold medal, and I get to the gold medal, I catch this carrot, and my problems are still there. And not only are my problems still there, people want to reach out to me like I'm on this pedestal, and they want to know my story, but all they really want to know is about the gold medal and the Purple Heart. You know what I mean? So they're literally pulling the story that they want out of me. So I'm giving it to them, but in the same time, I'm losing the value of my own story. And so that threw me for a loop as well. And it wasn't until we started talking about We Are All One Story that I was like, yo, if I'm going to share my story, I'm going to share it the way I want to share it. Yeah. It's not going to be from the victimhood. It's going to be from the ownership. Like, I'm going to own my story. I'm going to own being abused. I'm going to be own, you know, attempting to commit suicide, you know, being opiate addicted, all the struggles that I went through in order to get where I wanted to go to. And as soon as I was able to do that, that level of confidence just came back and refilled, you know, solidified who I was as a person, being able to look back at all the past traumas, and instead of being, woe is me and whatnot, it was like, damn, you went through that and you made it. You're capable of so much more. Tell other people as well. like
So you
people need to
began
hear
that
this.
transformation process with each other, sort of sharing your stories in a much more authentic way. Ralph, thank you for telling us about that. Like you achieve your life's dream, and actually it's not. It's like
Right.
a nightmare. It's absolutely. I remember it like because I always wanted to be an actor, right? Like I was 5 years old, I get on stage, and this is the way. Like this is how I'm going to do it with all this trauma and shit like this. This is how I'm going to get over it. And then I achieved it, and I hated it. I really was it's like I don't want this because it was horrible.
Right.
It was not real. It wasn't
Yeah.
me. It wasn't authentically me. So, like, you stumble into these conversations with each other. Do you remember what it was like when you first began to sort of get real and start talking in a real way with each other?
I mean, yeah, my back was against the wall. I mean, I had an inner compass, I had an inner compass in my heart now that I had denied my entire life that I started listening to. I had drowned it out with alcohol, with partying, with violence, with numbness, with whatever, you name it. And when I had to get sober, I had to listen to it. Like I'm saying, I just didn't wake up one day and I didn't want to kill myself anymore. It's like I knew that this was literally life and death, that my life depended on it.
Yeah.
And the way I got out of that is I cried out to God, and I didn't hear a voice or anything, but I felt a glimmer of hope. And that's been the catalyst, to where we are now. But within that, it was like I had no choice but to talk about
you
it.
wanted to live after all those years.
Exactly.
When, like,
yes.
Actually, I do want to live. Right.
Exactly. So, and if it was like, hey, I just literally asked God to save my life. I'm alive. I'm living. What next? Okay. Right. You have to live your life living in truth and being completely honest. And that's being honest with my story, being honest with others, being honest in business, being honest, period. Because I had built my whole persona on a lie, on what I wanted others to think of me. And I think Ralph felt that every time we talked, like he could hear the emotion in my voice. He can hear that there was a level of direness in the beginning, like, man, like, I want to live. I just don't know how. Like I'm trying, it's like, it's terrifying. And when I talked to Ralph, it's like his eyes opened up this big and he was all ears, and he was like, and, that was relieving. Wow. It was, empowering. And Ralph solidified, like, the things that I was going through, like, and he would just listen, and he would just be like, yeah, and then he would talk about his issues. Yeah. And then now we go and listen to other people talk about their issues, and we talk about our issues and let people know that, hey, you can't hold it in.
More than that, I mean, the you two guys are great. I love the way that you're very un-American and you don't sell this. You're very humble. I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm not making a nick out of Americans or anything like that. But it's, you are definitely underselling what you do, because I mean, just like listening to your stories and people just go, and you're still alive? Whoa, how is that? Because that's how your stories are coming. It's extraordinary stories, but that isn't the real story. The real story is the one that started, I guess, once you gave up what you said, the baggage, the excuses, the reasons for not living, and you found reasons to live. That's when the real story starts.
Yeah.
That's when the real courage is, right? When you just go, right, I've got to do this now. And you decided somehow, and how did you decide that we need to be helping other people understand that you can live? And not just other people, but you're targeting young men. I know that, which is massively admirable in my book. I absolutely admire you for the fact that, because getting through to young men before they destroy themselves is an absolutely crucial job that needs to happen. So tell us a little bit about how you got to that point where you thought, okay, we have something here and we want to help these kids, these young men. So there was a journey. You're both smiling at me. Go on.
Well, it's not just young men. I think it's all encompassing. It's with any person, and we just try and connect on just like the basic humanness of each other, male and man and girls and guys, and whoever's willing to listen to to our stories, you know, we go and share them, and we try and hit the positives and the similarities with anyone who we talk to. Yeah. But it just came from that place of dire need, you know, of if I'm going to live, you know, well, what next? You know, if this is going to be life, well, what next? And, you know, I can't drink anymore. I had the realization, like, man, if I drink, I'm not going to make it. Yeah. And, you know, that's a pretty serious realization. And I had that. And, you know, I went from not having the value in my own story and in my own person and my own life, from realizing that my value is inherent. Yeah. That I'm born with it and it can never be taken away. Yeah. So what does that mean? If my life has inherent value, then that means my story has just as much value. But we don't look at our life stories that way. We think, oh, yeah, you know, my story can never be like that, guys, or my story's not like that, guys. But we believe when you look at your own story, honestly, you're going to see how crazy it is, you know, that all of our life stories have twists and turns and ups and downs, and there's value in it, because we have that value. Yeah. And our stories are an extension of that. And, you know, from that place, you know, we are all one story. And I told Ralph all about it. Ralph, from the beginning, you know, like I said, he had his eyes open and he was honest with his own story. Yeah. And he said that he was all in, and, you know, we haven't stopped. Yeah.
And so now you tour with this story together. You go and visit people, you go and visit different parts of the US. And you have a thing that you offer people.
Yeah, I mean, we just...
Hey, Ralph, who's that? Bring them in. Get them to say hi to us.
Mom.
Hey, Mom.
Yeah, bring the mom.
Hi, Mom. What are you doing?
He's getting me a charger for my headphones.
Yeah, no problem.
But yeah, we just we travel the US. The most important part of the work is, you know, I think is when we listen individually to a person's story and we let them share their story with honesty so they can try and process it in a positive way. That's the bread and butter, is with each interview we do with each person, and we try and get to know at least the essence of them as much as we can. And we do travel the US, listening to people who are willing to share their story honestly. And we find people in different places in their story and of all different walks of life. And regardless, you know, we remind them that wherever they're at, you know, their story is meaningful.
And how long have you guys now been traveling around together doing this?
We started beginning of this year. We launched it on the 20th of January.
You chose 2020 to do this in.
Yeah.
Great. That's fantastic. And then March comes along and you were like...
And then March comes along and, hey, we're terrified. We don't know what's happening.
We went into scramble mode.
But actually, what a perfect time to do it.
Yeah. Right.
What an absolutely perfect time to do it, in terms of, because the risk was in this pandemic, wasn't it, that we would forget that we have the same story.
Yeah.
Out of fear that we would separate, and we would start fighting against each other. Because you know all those zombie apocalypse films. Yeah. But what happens is everything breaks down, people start eating each other, but actually that didn't happen, did it? You know?
Not yet.
There's still 2021.
That's right. Well, after January 2021, I've got a feeling things might improve slightly, but there you go. But interesting time in which to sort of set up an idea of wanting to get people to share their stories, when actually, you know, this very seriously, this pandemic comes along. Yeah. And in some ways is, you know, maybe energetically is making people feel like they want to retreat and disconnect from stories. Has the pandemic made it more difficult or easier in terms of being able to sort of reach out to people and encourage them to be sort of authentic as human beings?
You know, I just did an interview in LA, and I did a few this past week, and I think some of the people who came and shared their stories, they told me that the quarantine's been hard and that they needed somebody to talk to. They wanted to let their story out. now even more so, because I think a lot of us are having that time alone. And, a lot of us are trying to make sense of, our own stories. And, I know for this last trip, the people who shared their stories, I know there were a few of them, who like, it's time to go outside and now's as good a time as any to share my story with the world.
Yeah,
And,
I think that's very true, Jose. Emotionally, that really connects with me. The sense of disconnection and isolation and the desire to be part of something. I mean, a great thing about stories is, I originally trained in the arts therapies. Mm-hmm. And so I was trained a lot in myth and story and the importance of that, because, of course, prior to literacy, we were oral cultures and we shared stories, and stories were magic. I mean, they literally had meaning and magic in them. And rediscovering that, I think, is absolutely crucial. It's also my understanding of like 12-step meetings, for example, is this. There's a magic in somebody being able to share what they call their experience, strength, and hope, which is their life story. And the story itself has a power within it. And I think a lot of people have forgotten that there is a magic inherent in them, in just the way they are. If they can really get in touch with who they are and tell that very simply and very plainly to somebody else, there is a magic inherent in that, which encourages other people to connect and reach out. So, I think it's extraordinary what you two guys are doing at the moment. I can't think of a more insane time in which to go and say to people, just tell me your story. I'm willing to listen, and to receive people with love and compassion in the way that you're doing it. What are some of the things you're going to be doing in the next month or so that we can sort of, particularly people who might be tuning in from America, can know where they can find you? How do they get hold of you? Have you got a website that we can share with people? How can people book you in so that you can come and do some of your amazing work with them? Tell us something of the practicalities here.
Yeah, so we just finished, we're in our last chapter. We're in the home stretch of finishing 2020, just like everybody else. So we wrapped that up as far as getting the content loaded for that. We're going to share 5 more stories in this year, and you can watch those stories on our YouTube channel at We Are All One Story. Yeah. You can also watch them on our Instagram at We Are All One Story. If you want to know more about us, you can reach us at engagements@weareallonestory.net, or you can visit our website at weareallonestory.net. We're just still sharing stories. We're pretty hunkered down for 2020. We're going to see what happens as far as the new rules and stuff. But we're just excited to share these last stories that we got in.
Brilliant. And that's great. And what we'll do is my team will make sure that all those links go out. So that people can get hold of you. In terms of, I don't know if you're allowed to do this, but are you allowed to share a story with us that has really touched you in the last month or so in the work that you've done from both of you? Is there any particular story individually that has stood out that you'd want to share with us now before we end?
I think Ralph can go.
For me, it was my brother's story.
Was it?
Yeah, there's a lot of stories, and what I tell people all the time is that you might not relate to a person's story entirely, but there's little gems in there. They'll say something and they'll pull at your heartstrings, and that's the beauty about it, is that there's a body of work of so many stories on there. So you might not just go to one person and get your answers, but if you follow along, somebody's going to say something eventually that you're going to turn on to. And that was the beauty for me, is that, my story is within that, woven in with that. And so mine isn't the most important one. It's everyone as a collective that makes it beautiful. But yeah, so my brother.
Is there anything that stood out for you over the last month or so from the people that you've met? Any stories that have really sort of resonated with you?
I think we just did this trip, and actually, I did the interview. Ralph sat in for this interview, and Roger did as well. And I think we had this young lady named Lupe, and man, her interview was what it was all about. It was raw, it was vulnerable. And when you're in that room, you feel it. You feel the emotion, and you feel the power, you feel the passion, and you feel the hurt, the pain, and you have to empathize with the person. And I think that's powerful when, you know, I know that may get lost when we do it through the, you know, the technology outlets, but the in-person, it's beautiful, and it's something really to behold. And I truly feel that when I'm in that room, and when other people are in that room, and we're doing those interviews, that we really get to see and feel something special. And I think we all felt that with the Lupe story, you know, purely because of her honesty and vulnerability.
Great. Fantastic. I mean, it's really inspiring stuff. What you're doing is sort of allowing people to be authentic and share their stories, and become part of common humanity. And at the moment, I think there's a narrative out there that is trying to divide people and say, you know, your story is yours uniquely, doesn't connect to my story, and will never. But that's not true. It's absolutely not true. Our stories, as you say, Ralph, they become blended. They become woven together, and we just have to see it and acknowledge it. And the various false divisions that are created just fade away. I think one of the things I'm really struck by things like AA and these types of groups, it's not just AA, but I think AA has a saying, doesn't it? We are people who would not normally mix.
Yeah.
And it's this idea of there are ways of breaking down those barriers, and I think you guys have another way of breaking down those barriers and offering hope to the world. So it's been really, really inspiring and lovely to have you both on. And
thank you.
Joining us from America's, like the truth is, our media at the moment are hyping up what a mess America is, and everybody's trying to kill each other.
Our media too.
You know what I mean? It's like, you'd imagine there was a civil war going on over there, but actually just meeting you two, that really balances it for me. So no, it's not. The people are just getting on with their lives.
Yeah.
That's what's happening. And they're doing the best they can with the situation that they're in, which is true for all of us. We're all just doing that, man.
Yeah, exactly.
It's been lovely to have you both on. And we have to finish there, unfortunately, folks. Hopefully I'll see you all next week at the next show. Again, I can't remember who's on next week. That's just me. I'll never be able to remember that stuff. But it's been great to have you all here. And we're going to finish for tonight. See you next week. Ralph, Jose, don't go anywhere. We'll just cut off, but you stay there and I'll chat to you after the show. Bye-bye, folks.
Awesome.